We're glad you could join us for WCNY Connected. My name is Jim Maroney, here with Claudia Tenney, the representative for New York's 22nd Congressional District from New Hartford. We're glad you're joining us, and you're joining us at a time when there's a great deal of interest in what is happening in Washington, specifically of late with the FISA memo. Tell us more about what you're thinking when it comes to this.
Well, you're talking about the FISA memo, or what happened as far as what was going on with the investigation. The memo was actually created by the Intelligence Committee on the Republican side. The memo was really being mischaracterized. The memo was just intended as an abstract, meaning it was a summary of what the compilation of what the FISA or what the Intelligence Committee had heard and the testimony of everyone. There's an underlying Inspector General's report and some other information that would be coming out to support the documents in the so-called memo that released the memo you heard about. What's interesting, though, is that the memo has been what they call scrubbed. That means that the methods and the sources have been taken out of it so that it wouldn't reveal any of the confidential information that can't be revealed. Right now, the Democrats have also put out a memo, and that memo is going through the process of being scrubbed. What happens is first the members get a chance to view it, and then it gets scrubbed, and then it goes to the president, and the president makes the decision about releasing it, which I'm sure he will do.
There's a national security aspect to this that those who have opposed this memo's release have moved consistently. You don't believe that that's the case?
No, not at all with this memo. I think what's most important to highlight about this, what this memo reveals, is a gross misuse and abuse of power by intelligence agencies that are entrusted with confidential information. And we just recently, and there's been a lot of, I want to say, misinformation characterizing the reauthorization of Section 702 of the so-called FISA. What FISA is, and it's a controversial court, and we had a number of people on our side also oppose it. It was a mixed vote. But what FISA does is, since 9/11, it has given our intelligence agencies the ability to spy on non-American citizens, meaning they have to go to the court with a warrant. If they have probable cause, they go to a so-called FISA court, and the court determines if there's probable cause. What we did in renewing the recent memo, which I think I've heard even Republican conservative type commentators criticizing it, but what the memo does, what the new FISA renewal does, is says that if you're wiretapping, for example, a terrorist organization, and the terrorist organization somehow picks up a conversation with an American citizen, what happens is now the court says, oh, we've got an American citizen. There is an additional warrant requirement. You can't go and spy on this American citizen and say, we're spying on terrorist activities. This American citizen, we find out now, has another crime unrelated to what we originally obtained our warrant for. The new law requires an additional warrant if they're going to be moving outside of the original scope. So it's really not totally related to what's happening now, except for that FISA is being used, the court, which is a confidential court, where it is controversial in one aspect that only one party can go before the court. So if I'm the person being spied on, my rights could be in jeopardy if they decide, for example, in this case of Carter Page and some of the people that were being targeted, we find out, we think it's not rightfully, they're in a bar and they're overheard by someone saying, I'm drinking, ha ha ha, I've got to deal with with the Russians, and all of a sudden this person is now being surveilled by the United States of America using their power. And for years and years and years, finding out there's really nothing there, the person hasn't been indicted, they haven't found a crime, it's more like a fishing expedition. And that's where it becomes dangerous, and that's what was revealed by the so-called Devin Nunes memo. That's the memo that just came out on the Republican side. I haven't read the Democrats' memo. When I get to D.C., I'll take a look at it. But it's very important to understand the abuse of power, that our federal government has these unique powers that are used for protecting and securing our nation, are being used in a way to spy on American citizens, and that is concerning. And I think transparency to the point where we don't disclose sources and methods is important. And I think both memos, everything needs to come out as long as we're not disclosing the sources and methods.
Which leads me to ask, should we, as the Chicago Tribune has suggested, just release everything when it comes to this specific investigation, which is truly consumed, to this point, the Trump administration?
Yeah, everything that doesn't expose anything that's going to jeopardize our security interests. And there's probably, it looks like there's not really much that was jeopardizing our security interests in this particular case, especially involving this so-called wiretap on our president.
The DON'T Act is something that you proposed. This is a response to the opioid crisis. You are working for legislation that would speak to those who import fentanyl. When will we move towards legislation that speaks to the actual prescription and sale of it here, fentanyl and others, that are really cornerstone prescribables in this crisis?
It's an interesting question because right now opioids is a major problem in our communities. I've lost neighbors and friends to the opioid addiction crisis. Part of the problem, though, is the illegal manufacture of synthetics, like synthetic fentanyl, which is 50 to 100 times more addictive than heroin, coming across our border with illegal trafficking of this. So we're trying to stop it at the border, and other countries like China, who are importing it and violating our laws. But when it comes to prescription, we still have a prescription. It has to be prescribed by a doctor and dispensed by a licensed pharmacy. And there has been a lot of really interesting arguments made that in the opioid, there really has been no proof that use of opioids in long-term pain medication is really effective. It's usually used, morphine and those things, when you first come out of a major surgery. But once you get into long-term pain, there's really no proof or credible study from what I've heard from experts that justify the long-term use of opioids. So that is a very good question. It's something I think we should start looking into.
Because people are
the actual
angriest,
prescription.
Yes, and the companies that are moving medical groups, individual physicians, promoting the idea of these responses to pain.
Well, the companies are responding to medical prescriptions. So if it is determined that these should not be prescribed after major surgery or where it's used in a way that is where it's been identified as helpful, but beyond that, I think it is a crisis. It is something that I think doctors and experts in that field, we should look into whether or not we should be prescribing this type of lethal opioid. It really is lethal, as we've turned out. I mean, the number of deaths is incredible a year.
You've just earned an endorsement from the Winning for Women national group. And first of all, are you going to run for re-election?
Well, I've got to announce that soon, don't I?
Well,
I'm intending on running. I haven't made a formal announcement yet, though.
But that's to be expected.
Yes, soon.
So with Winning for Women, a national group that is not necessarily connected in any way to other major national women's groups or even something like the Me Too movement, the idea of receiving an endorsement like that at a time when the current swell of support for women, whether it is for Me Too and the campaign against sexual harassment or other rising movements that are not associated on a regular basis with Republican politics or certainly the Trump administration. What is it like being a Republican freshman in the House seeking re-election with that reality?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I have been a woman business owner. I'm a lawyer. I'm a mother. I was a single parent of my son and raised him with my parents across the street, which was very helpful. But as a woman, I don't look at things as women's issues. I look at women being part of the entire framework. Every issue is a women's issue. And so I advocate on that basis. I don't run as a woman. Winning for Women is about women who stand for kind of center-right policies or policies that affect all women, especially financial issues. Sometimes I think the Me Too movement is a little, and the Women's March and some of these things, it's great to celebrate women, but I go to these events and I see the type of sexuality that is being, and body parts displayed and exposed, for example, in the Women's March and some of these things. I'm like, is that really what it's about to be a woman that's a leader in our community, a leader in politics? That's what we're trying to do, is find more women who are not just getting votes because they're women, but getting votes because they're leaders in our communities and they're standing for what everyone stands for, regardless of, race or gender or class.
Is that a conservative, middle-of-the-road obstacle to perhaps reaching what is now the mobilized, energized female electorate that is available right now?
Yeah, I never run like, oh, I'm a woman, I'm going to run and try to get women's votes. I try to look at my people I represent as everybody. And so I don't think it's conservative. I think it's just advocating for people in my community, whether they happen to be women or they're from minorities or they're Bosnians who are a big part of my community and my life. So I really just think, dividing people up in a way that separates us and the identity politics model, I think, is more on the left. I think is frustrating. I mean, the resist movement really, to me, means obstruct. And so I don't see how that brings us together and unifies us. One of the great things about this country, e pluribus unum, from many one. We should all be joining together to stand for what this country is about, which is freedom. And it is one of the, it is not perfect in many ways, but we have a constitution and a framework that allows us to correct past wrongs and to move forward and freedom is a universal value that all human beings desire and want. And so I think when I look at what my mission is to provide the greatest amount of freedom and the greatest amount of respect for people, respecting their individuality, whether they're women or whether they're blacks or whether they're Hispanic or Asian or all the wonderful mix of people that we have in our communities. They all should be respected, not just one or the other, like targeting them and delineating them in a way that we want to divide and conquer. I find that to be really an anathema to what we really stand for.
Your seat, which represents the Mohawk Valley all the way down to Binghamton up towards Oswego, has been recognized as one of 10 in this country and in this election cycle that is most in play or certainly most hotly contested.
Yeah, that's what they say, but every challenge I've had has been pretty substantial. I never shy away from the challenge or the privilege and honor to do this job. I'm not in it for some long haul. I'm not in it for a career. I'm in it because I'm really on a mission to try to help our communities. And I think I've done that. I think we've had a lot of accomplishments. I'm a top 10 targeted seat because I have not been endorsed by my local Republican Party because I'm unique. I'm not one of the people that is the good old boys who've been ushered in, with the gilded path. I'm facing someone who has been on the gilded path on the Democratic side. So I like my chances against somebody who hasn't really been tested to really fight the fight. And I've always been overspent. Last year I was overspent. I think I had, in the end, I faced a three-way primary. I had $200,000. My opponents had $3 million. I faced a three-way general election. My opponents had over $13 million. I had a little over $3 million. I'm considered the largest underdog in the nation because I've overcome great obstacles. So when I see me as a top 10 targeted seat, I love the challenge. It makes it even more exciting for me. And I think it shows that they're concerned because the identity politics model, again, says we can't have a woman who happens to be a Republican advancing principles in a credible, truthful way.
I want to turn our attention to DACA. When you were running for this office, the idea of a wall seemed almost, some would have called it cartoonish. And here we are, it's on the table, it's off the table, we'll get someone else to pay for it, we'll pay for it. In your second year in your role in Washington, you will stand where when it comes time to talk about the wall?
Yeah, the wall's going to be built. We have walls everywhere. Joe Kennedy did the response to the State of the Union address, and he lives in a home with walls around it, a big, beautiful mansion. Why does he have walls? Why are there walls between dangerous areas of our world, like between Palestine and Israel, and the designation in Jerusalem? There's walls on the southern border right now. I think what the president talks about with a wall, and I haven't done the border security trip yet, but everyone who has taken the border security trip, Democrats and Republicans alike, Chuck Schumer, Dianne Feinstein, Dick Durbin, all of these people have supported the wall in the past. I think they've been reluctant to come out and talk about it now because it's not part of the modern dialogue. But some kind of border to minimize the work that our border security agents are doing to stop, we talked about earlier, opioid, human trafficking, drug trafficking, illegal things are coming across our border. It isn't so much about the DACA recipients or people that are immigrants coming across the border. It's more about the people who are committing illegality. So the wall is actually helpful to border security agents, and they have all unanimously expressed that support. Now, one big, solid, beautiful wall, sometimes the president likes to engage in colorful language. I don't think that's really what is meant by it, but what the president proposed really incredibly in the State of the Union was a wall, a fund that would do some kind of border security, which included a wall and some form of a wall.
In your early months of service to your House district, some have said that you haven't been as accessible as they may have wanted.
It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I work every single day. I've
taken and there's no question. No one's questioning whether you're working. The question is becoming: can we see you and approach you and share time with you more? Yeah. You've been in Broome County lately. You spent time up in Rome, but there are folks who've been saying, "Can we spend time with you more?" What are you going to tell them?
I think it's hilarious. But first of all, it is a hit job by the resist movement to try to undermine everything that I am. It is purely politics. And everyone knows I wouldn't be where I am in the position I'm in with very little money. As I said, I'm the largest underdog in the nation. I didn't get there for money. And I'll tell you why. They're nervous. And somebody said to me, I'm not going to reveal who it was, but it was an important person in leadership in Washington, said to me, you know, there's one thing, the only thing scarier than a person running with a lot of money is someone that doesn't have the money and wins, because they stand on principle and they tell the truth. And that's what I've always done. And I've worked really hard with my constituents. I don't think anyone can match me with my grassroots effort, my willingness to go out and meet with constituents. I've gone out and met with every one of the people that were complaining about me and saying I wasn't meeting with them. I'd met with them one-on-one, some of them for 45 minutes and an hour. And I have 717,000 and change constituents. So almost all of them have met with them. I have not turned down any interviews with anyone. I've met with them. They've been very hostile, extremely rude in many cases, but they have the right to have me listen to what they have to say.
Representative Claudia Tenney.
Thank you.
We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And this seat is always available if you'd like to share.
I'd love to come in. If you want to come, I will go, and can't wait to debate my opponent. And thank you guys for doing that. I love to debate and talk to my constituents. That's the fun of this job. I mean, it is about the debate. That's what it's about.
I'm sure we'll have you and your opponent in the fall.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. We're glad you could join us again for another edition of WCNY Connected.
We're rolling.